Good morning, everyone. And thank you for being here today as we come together to honor and remember the thousands of lives taken on September 11th and all of those who lost their lives since that horrific day. It's hard to imagine it has been 22 years since the day our city and our nation was attacked. I was a young police officer at the time, wearing a uniform like you, serving our city. The images of burning towers and of the heroic effort by first responders are seared into our memories. However, too often, the role the Department of Correction played for our city on and after September 11th is too often sometimes forgotten. But we remember. You were there. You risked your lives and you saved lives. So many of our officers, captains, assistant deputy wardens, and other uniformed members and non-uniformed members of the service ran towards the dangers without hesitation, many racing from here towards the horrors that they could see unfolding in the distance. They did it for their country, they did it for their city, and for each other. They did it because they raised their hands and took oaths to protect others. And they absolutely honored those solemn oaths. On land and by water, the Department of Correction responded to the World Trade Center calmly and bravely. Many of you helped evacuate thousands of panicked New Yorkers from Lower Manhattan, and you quickly established the communication system that would be essential for operations at the site. You worked diligently 24/7 to help your brothers and sisters in law enforcement and emergency response who suffered such a horrific and traumatic losses. You stood side by side with your law enforcement brothers and sisters and emergency responders. You stood with them on the pile for days that became weeks and weeks that became months. And you honored them at memorial services and funerals again and again. And you did the heartbreaking work of identifying the remains of those who were murdered by cowardly terrorists on their attack on innocent people. In doing so, you sought to counter violence, hate, and evil with professionalism, dignity, respect, and love. That day saw the worst of humanity, but in return, New York City demonstrated the very best, and that was especially true for the Department of Corrections. Our men and women stood tall on September 11th. You were front and center, showing the resilience and courage of New York's boldest. This year, once again, we remember the members of the Department of Correction who have died from World Trade Center illnesses, men and women who were selfless and compassionate and did all they could do to help others. This year, we will also be seeing the opening of a new exhibit at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum, which will include equipment used and worn by our officers and other uniformed staff as they risked their own health and selflessly helped others. We are grateful to the museum for this inclusion because this will help ensure future generations know how much the Department of Correction means to this city and how well it performed on our city's darkest day. And last but certainly not least, this year we have produced a new book that tells the story of so many of our officers and uniformed staff and how they contributed to the World Trade Center recovery and rescue operations. This book, which many of you have seen by your seats, Bold Responders, Voices from the New York City Department of Corrections response to 9/11. This book brings to life the heroic acts of our men and women. That incredible work I just detailed and so much more, it's here in the pages of this book as a permanent testament to your unwavering dedication in the face of unimaginable devastation. Thank you to our former press secretary, Jason Kirsten, who's with us today, who started this project and worked hard to collect these important stories that should not be lost to history. Jason spent countless hours researching, tracking down people, and conducting interviews, much of which is included in the book. Our current team at DCPI picked up Jason's work and got it across the finish line. And I salute everyone involved with the important telling of this story. I encourage all of you to read these stories and take pride in the remarkable work of our agency when the city needed us the most. Let us all remember the members of the Department of Correction family who have grown sick, lost their lives due to September 11 illnesses. Sadly, those losses of life from that day continues to cut a deep wound in our agency and other agencies and communities across our great city. And finally, thank you to everyone from our department who responded on that tragic day and served as a shining example of why you are rightfully New York's boldest. God bless, be safe, and know that we will never forget. Thank you.